and then what are the solutions I can form around it? So I was thinking like, what are the common mistakes in community building um, that I've seen like projects make on a consistent basis. Now, I was really thinking about this deeply because I've seen a lot from my 3 years, um, especially in like, I don't know. I guess James, do you want to start that off and kind of
Sure.
share your
Yeah.
insights?
There's a lot there. Look, like, so I think the biggest, there's a few, man, there's so many things to
There's
go
literally
off.
so many. Yeah, there's so many.
So
I
many
know.
things because
Yeah.
I see wrong things all the time. And even now, like, okay, let's just go off of the biggest thing now, right? So we were all spoiled rotten during the bull rush, right? During the bull run, where you could go from concept to sell out in 60 days. Okay, like that's not realistic. And now, so even now, when the market's lost like is 70% of its value, 80% of its value. Like people, these the founders are still coming in saying we want to mint out in 60 days. And it's like, yeah, you're not gonna do that, man. Like you're so the only reason why that was able to take place during the bull run was because of supply and demand, right? So there was an oversupply, hundreds of thousands of value seekers, people looking for ROI, hundreds of thousands of them, right? So it didn't matter how many projects came out, like, 1 out of 4 was selling out, right? Like it was just, I mean, people were just buying them because the likelihood that you could make something on a pump was there. It was a high upside, low downside, right? It's just not the case anymore. So I think the biggest thing is coming in thinking short-term gimmicks are going to continue to work, like whitelisting, gamifying everything, and just like trying to drive hype, like thinking that that's going to continue to work. It just doesn't work anymore. You have to provide value to your community. It's 100% has to happen, and you have to provide it early and often. So I think that that's number one, is focusing on gimmicks. The second one that I see, and I've seen this the entire time, like right now everybody talks about brand. Don't sell an NFT, sell a brand. And that's cool. That's cool. Like, don't get me wrong, branding is essential, but what I see is over branding, right? So that's like you go into the community and there's branding everywhere. And what happens is when you over brand, you create a very sterile community that doesn't feel like a community. It feels like a salesman trying to beat you over the head, um, and so I would just caution people on that too. Like, don't branding is great,
Yes.
have a good brand, but don't over brand.
I like that aspect of things because, like you said, it kind of dilutes the experience of the community members in totality, which is quite different than a lot of the other marketing that we've seen in the Web 2 side, especially when it comes to like community building too. There's a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of really finding out like when I see like the common mistakes, like I think it goes back to like the roots too of like why you're even starting this company, whether it's in NFTs or DeFi. And it's like, what is the why, what is the purpose of your community in the first place, and really like kind of thinking about that and figuring out like what you envision the community to become, because just like a utility, or sorry, like just a roadmap for NFT projects, there has to be a roadmap planned out for the community as well, whether that be from the event side to how you're going to onboard,
100%.
and everything like that. And again, I feel like not a lot of communities, nor companies in this space take that into consideration because um, if done right, if nurturing and building the community is done right, it can have exponential effects on the growth of your company, and brand for the long term, right? And also, like I said before, like reduce the cost and like so like that's like something I've seen was like
Yeah.
where people or like the companies, like the founders themselves, don't really take the time to consider like what is the actual why behind my community? Why am I starting this up? Who are the people I want to serve to? What value do they see out of coming into the community itself? Just kind of questions like that to play with to really make sure that you had the
You know,
foundation set up, right?
what's crazy is every aspect. Like it is crazy to me when I see business people come into the space and treat it differently than they would their own business. Because okay, if you have a startup, you run a business, you're successful, then you understand that strategy, planning, it went into being part of your success. But then they overlook that completely when it comes to community. They just feel like, we'll just throw up a Discord and and people are going to join. But yeah, I mean, like, no, everything in life you have to plan out. Anything that's worthwhile, you have to plan out, you have to strategize, and you have to build out appropriately and properly. And when you're dealing with people and building relationships, that's all the more necessary. So yeah, 100%, man. I can't agree with you more on that. It's essential. It's essential.
Yeah, and like, oh, Richie, I'll let you add to that.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I was, just going to go back to, you talk about relationships, and I think the biggest thing is to understand why we're here, right? The community, and really, one of the biggest or the first things to understand is that it's for the community, by the community, and that really the biggest thing is, you can't do it alone, and you really want to, for many reasons, that you want to be as lean as possible, you want to be as efficient as possible, but really you want it to be as personalized as possible, custom tailored. And I think that's, one of the it goes into one of the biggest mistakes that I see occurring in the communities, is that they're not doing enough to seek out or to discover the most passionate, loyal, influential community members that can have the biggest effect. And I think, there have been many TED Talks about this, talked about this many times. If many communities would quickly go in and see who those individuals are and have systems and, there's software and things that can aid in that, and bring them up into, as an advisor, or, into some kind of consulting group, something to actually dictate the future, that would be huge, right? Because a lot of these people, like the passionate, the true believers, they're willing to, like they're will. I think James was talking on, speaking about it earlier. Like they're willing to work for nothing. They're willing to work just to have an effect, to change, to have the the vision that they're looking for. And I'm not saying, hey, expect these people to work for nothing, but just saying, the amount of passion they have is unmatched. And the quicker that you get these people, the better. Because I
Yes.
think a lot of these individuals, myself included, if you come into a collection and, you have so much of a vision, and, you do certain things, but then you see really, you don't really feel like you're valued. And it just seems like they have their own agenda, and they're really, they don't really care about what really the community wants. And you see a lot of things going on, like there's no planning. They're just kind of like responding, and kind of just, it's more promotional branded stuff. Ugh. I think that's the other thing. And then the other thing, I think these communities need to understand too, again, it goes back to, like just the teachings that occur in business school. And again, a lot of these things, this is art, and these are done by artists. And like the 80-20 rule. I think that right now, really the whole community is treated pretty much as a whole. And I think we need to understand that usually it's 20% or less are going to provide you 80% of your profit and your gains. And we need to see more thinking done around this to recognize who those at least five, top 5, 10, 15% are, that are really gaining the traction, and make sure that they're rewarded accordingly. Right. And that's,
Yeah.
just making sure, again, that we have two different reward tiers, one for, that top 20, 15, or 10%, wherever you want to go, and a whole nother one that rewards the masses, randomness, all that great stuff for everyone else. So that'll always be the same. I'm just talking, let's evolve it. Let's not degrade. And
Yeah.
but anyways, those are my two main concerns.
Yeah, no, I really like that a lot. That's that, and like, oh, what are you gonna say, James? I'll let you speak.
I was just gonna say, like, there's two things I just want to say real quick. Like, first thing, dead on about identifying top performers. I mean, same thing as business, same thing in real life. You identify your best friends and you keep them around for the same reason, right? Because they're awesome and they provide that value back to you, and they're not just takers, right? You kind of get rid of the takers over time, and you get people that actually treat you like a human being. Same thing in community, right? Like, I mean, we built my entire team. We have like 50 people on staff. We built our entire business off of those people in our NFT communities that are passionate, and we brought them onto our company, right? So, they became leaders in the communities that we were managing, and then we gave them paid positions within our company, and that's how we've grown. Right, was off of these passionate individuals. And then two, when you're talking about I'm sorry, Richard, can you go into your sec? Because man, I lost my train of thought on the second thing. And I had
Talking basically about hotonomics and how the 80/20 rule and different things like that.
yeah. So the other thing is like rewards, right? So like the thing is a lot of people get caught up in this the tangible reward aspect, and that's cool. People like to get, incentives. But the thing about incentives, just like any incentive, like you get a paycheck, a tangible paycheck. It's cool the first time you got it. The second time you're like, okay, this is kind of cool. Third time you're like, meh, okay, right? So there's a diminishing return there with tangible incentives. The biggest thing that I think a lot of communities miss out on is the intangibles, right? That's the recognition. That's the calling people out when they're doing amazing jobs in the community,
Yeah,
giving them a shout out in the announcement field, and bringing them up on stage and saying, this person is amazing. We love this person, right? Like that goes so far, so far.
exactly.
So,
No, yeah,
yeah.
I really like that because like that's kind of like what I was gonna say too is like when you're able to, like, especially at an early stage start of building like your community and looking at the most loyal people that you have right off the bat, like I think it's like really crucial at that stage, because if you're trying to envision your community in the next like 5 years, how it's going to be, don't you want to base um, at least the foundation off of like the most loyal people that you've just found early on in the community, right? And kind of interview them, and see who they are, what do they enjoy, what value they want to bring to the table. Like everyone has their own skill sets in these worlds too that can be utilized in certain ways that can build upon um the project itself, whether that be the DeFi or NFT project, right? And so it's like, identifying those early ideal community members early on too, like even like the top 10 that you found is super important. I feel like, in my opinion, just to like get a gauge of like who you really want to serve and who you want to be a part of this community, the vibe, the culture, right? It's really interesting in that aspect.
So one thing I'll say to that is I that's probably the third thing that I think is not that irritates me is that communities aren't doing enough to take advantage of the community's resources. So for instance, I think every community has its own utility fingerprint, right? And they have their own community generated utility, different things like that. But that's just to get me started. But I think that we need to do more to appreciate what's within the community, and I think, those things, again, they go to help create a long-term sustainable competitive advantage, high barriers to entry that's hard to imitate, right? Because every community will have a very unique fingerprint, and who knows from within what the community is able to create and build.
Yeah, no, like that's actually, when you think
100%.
about it from like a competitor standpoint too, I mean, you can sure might have the same product in certain aspects, and the value might provide might have certain differentiators, but the one thing that your competitor can't take away from you in certain aspects, if you do this really well, is the community itself. If you know how to build the relationships with your community members really well, I mean, that's one thing that's really hard to kind of pull away from in that aspect too. Um,
Yeah.
and like
Like,
you guys touched upon it. Yeah, what are you gonna say?
oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, what I was gonna go on is like, also like one thing too I've seen in communities, like obviously trust is so important. Trust in this space in general. Trust in general is just very important to build upon people. And like the one mistake too that I've seen a lot, that maybe you guys have seen this too, with like founders especially, is when they announce things too prematurely, without really fulfilling them at that expected time, or not communicating properly. I think communication too is extremely important. Like, that's one thing I've seen kind of butcher communities, especially ones that I've been heavily invested into, is where, like, the founders go out of the way to say something where, hey, this is going to be released at a certain time, and then obviously it doesn't happen. And now everyone's like, well, how can I trust the future announcements if you can't even fulfill the ones that you've been talking about? So there has to be a balance too. There's a lot of things to kind of look at and juggle in
You
certain
know,
aspects.
there's a couple things there. Like I've seen it work both ways, man. I think it all boils down to the initial community building and how open and honest you are from the very beginning
Yeah,
about everything and how transparent you are. Because like I've seen founders that aren't really transparent and they do that, right? And they just make announcements and then they falter on their dates and the community tears them apart because the relationship was never built in the first place with them and they've never been transparent about the building process and behind the scenes in the first place. But then on the other side, I've seen the founders and the core teams that are completely transparent. Everyone knows what's going on. They're letting them know about the hiccups. They're letting them know about, that the lead developer just quit, right? Or, you know what I mean? Like they're letting them know about these things.
yeah,
And the community responds like human beings usually do, with compassion and understanding. And sure, you're going to have those moon boys that are going to get upset and be like, you're not, you're not doing right. But 90% of the community is going to follow along because you've been transparent and honest, right? Honesty's always the best option. The other thing, real quick, I want to touch on that you said just a second ago. When you were talking about like interviewing your loyal supporters, like what I think, honestly, I think like people need to turn that on its head a little bit. I think we need to interview people as they come into the community. I think we need to really work on our onboarding strategy.
I was gonna say
And I mean,
that. Yeah, I was gonna touch
like
upon
100,
that. That's so. Yeah.
like why not? Like we do this
Well,
in business. We do. Oh, go ahead.
uh,
Go ahead.
well, just to speak to that, so we actually I just produced a survey yesterday for a new project, Bionic Owls, that we're working with, where they are doing what you just said, and we have a 12-question survey through
Hmm.
Qualtrics that's taking everything, including like what's your area of specialty,
Yeah.
right? So figuring out, because a lot of these people, they want to be in the army, they do great, they become ambassadors.
But go go
So
go further, Richard. Like go further. Like what I would suggest people do, honestly, man, develop a legitimate onboarding experience from the very beginning when they come into your community, just like you would for when you're hiring valued employees at your company, right? Take the time, take 10-minute segments and talk to these people. Sure, if you get 1,000 people coming in and it starts to get hype, split that up and have 50 people come in on these calls at a time with a core team member where they can answer questions, talk to people one on one when they're joining the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
why not? Why not?
Like I like to think
yeah,
of
that would be great. That would be sweet.
I like to think of like the onboarding as like, from an analogy standpoint, is like having a guest come to your home, right? Like, what do you do when you bring inviting guests to your home for, like, maybe a party or something like that? You walk them in, you greet them, you show them around, you tell them, hey, like, this is where this is. You can hang your coat here. You can do this. Here are all the people that you can come and speak to and form conversations around, and kind of guide them through that too, and then see what they want, like that. Especially, like, that's what we were talking about, Richard and I too, with like the onboarding standpoint. It's really important because that's your first impression as a community member coming in, and imagine it being freaking amazing. Like, it's going to be hard to leave at that point, especially
Yeah,
if
I
they
mean,
guide
imagine the
you.
conversion, right?
Exactly, yeah. And like,
Like, imagine the
especially if you.
conversion. Yeah, like, oh, sorry, go ahead. I think I'm lagging, by the way. I think I
No,
lag. So
yeah.
when I,
I think we're both
yeah,
lagging. It's
I
all
think,
right.
okay.
um
I'm,
like, I was gonna say, like just like coming into like a Discord, for example, like, and then being asked these specific questions of like, what does it feel like for you to be a part of this community? What would you like to see? What things can you bring to the table? And then after that, being guided around the Discord by certain people, and being introduced. I think the biggest thing too is just establishing relationships with other community members, like having at least someone dedicated on your team to help, at least with the onboarding standpoint, establish relationships with those new members with established already current members in there to help form that bond more strongly, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like one thing. Go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say, regarding the relationships, I think that the other thing too, that we're working on, through that survey, and again, the in-person thing is great, but also expectations and, what kind of utility, what are you wanting this collection to do? Like, what are you hoping to do that nobody's ever done? Just trying to kind of brainstorm and help them have a effect, on what's going on, and making sure that we're aligning with expectations and all that. So yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, data's dope. Data's dope. I mean, data's necessary, but like, also like one thing I was gonna say about the whole like onboarding and like he was talking about with relationships and getting people to connect with each other. One thing we did in a community called Savannah on Solana, it rhymes, hey. But no, one thing we did was instead of having like these initial competitions when people come in to like invite or do whatever, like, basic type of, engagement tactic, what we did is we actually had people go out and connect with so when, on each Discord, there's a new channel, like where it shows like, welcome, 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 right? So what we
Yep.
did is we reward people for messaging these new people. And this was before like everybody was like, no, don't DM anybody. But this was like last year. Okay. And what they would do is they would go DM these new people coming in, and they would get rewarded by finding out 3 to 5 things about this person. And then bringing that into a channel, providing proof, and they would create conversations around that. So it wasn't introduce yourself. We were rewarding the community members to go introduce themselves to these people and have them introduce themselves back, right? So it was creating relationships from the very beginning. And that's what I'm talking about. Like these little ways that you can create a unique onboarding experience for your community to create those one-on-one conversations from the very beginning. It's essential. It's essential. And there's just some alpha here for anybody looking to develop an amazing onboarding experience. Check out DAOLens. DAOLens, that's DAOLENS, DAOLens.com. It's phenomenal. Their onboarding system is top notch, and it's going to revolutionize onboarding for communities. So there's my plug. I'm not affiliated. I just love their stuff.